name is Lauren Cephus, and I'm the Vice President of the Black Commission. And today we are sharing space with some really awesome women who happen to also be our allies. If you all could introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about what is prompting you to be an ally for the Black community. We'll start with Bonnie.
Wow, pressure. My name is Bonnie Hendricks. I'm the current president of Women's March, Jacksonville, Florida. I have been a resident of Jacksonville since 2007. I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia, and I would guess the gut thing that I feel, uh, what is apparent, is the continued injustice and inequities that the black population has to deal with. And the fact that it's driven from a place not of love, not of compassion, not of understanding, not of equality, but of ignorance in some cases, lack of information, lack of willingness to listen and to learn, and the inability to appreciate the humanity in everyone. So I think that's a key driver for me to work on allyship and being an ally.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Oh, um, so I'm Chris Kiernan, um, and um, my role or my job in the community is to support others. Um, I don't necessarily feel as if we need any more white leadership. Point blank period. There are capable black leaders, many capable black leaders that do not have leadership just because they are black, and we they don't necessarily have the positions that they deserve, and it's because there's so many people occupying black spaces that do not belong. And so my position in the world is to support my black sisters. I hate to say it like that, but my black sisters, my family, my community, the people that I trust the most need to be in power, and those people just so happen to be black women. So that's why I am doing what I'm doing.
Thank you. Hope?
I'm Hope McMath and a lifelong resident of Jacksonville, Florida, so born and raised here. And I think my experiences here have helped to shape how I engage in this work and see the need for white people to stand really solidly in solidarity with Black folk. I've spent a lifetime here of bouncing between in a sort of blissful though challenging childhood that was in a very diverse community, and then spending a whole lot of my adult life in mostly white spaces and recognizing the utter mediocrity of so much of that white leadership, be it government, be it nonprofits, be it academia, that I really realized fairly late in life, actually, how much I had missed by spending so much of my adult life unaware of Black history, of Black culture, of really close relationships with Black men and women, and remembering that I had that when I was a child. And so it has taken intentionality to do my own work in unlearning and learning simultaneously, while also listening really closely to friends and peers and colleagues in the Black community, to know where I should be standing, where I need to stand back, and where I at times just need to go away. So, yeah, just a bit of the motivation.
Stand back, where to stand. What does that mean exactly? And anybody can chime in. It doesn't have to just specifically be Hope. Because that's an awkward space to be in. I can imagine. Well, I know on my own end, it's sometimes an awkward place to be in as a woman. So how is it as an ally? How does that feel? Anybody?
So I'll jump in since I put those words out into the universe, right? So, using the word awkward is itself awkward, right? Because whatever discomfort I might feel in pushing against sort of all of these forces, certainly that discomfort doesn't even come close to comparing to the overt and under the surface racism that people face every day, right? So whatever awkwardness might be created by both trying to engage in a culture and world that is not my own and push back against the status quo is, I feel like, the kind of discomfort that everybody needs to get used to being in. I'm not always good at being in that space. I sometimes have a default position of wanting to reject that discomfort and sort of retreat. But more often than not now, I try, again, not always successfully, but try to actually lean hard into that discomfort, recognizing that that's the place for growth and attainment of wisdom and getting closer to what might be right.
Anybody else?
Well, I have found myself in spaces of being an ally and challenging my own thinking about what that means. And I know when the Black Lives Matter protest evolved last year, it was time for the white allies to not take the lead, but open doors, provide opportunities and support, and be there, be an accomplice, be a co-conspirator, a co-resistor, but not take the mic.
Okay.
And I had to fight that several times because my inclination is to speak out when you see wrongdoing and, be there, be seen, but there was a indigenous quote that was used in that if you're here to support me, something, you're in the wrong place. But if you're here because you realize your liberation is bound to mine, then let's work together. And it was Lila Watson or something like that made the statement. So realizing that our liberation is tied together. I mean, it's not a free society if everyone's not free. It's not equal society if it's not equal to all. Our opportunity is not equal to all. But I have found myself in spaces where, even my black brothers and sisters didn't agree. So how do I put my voice in that space without being intrusive or appearing as if I'm trying to overshadow their thinking or their efforts, and be an accomplice, be a partner, if you would. So it's at times very difficult, and but I agree with Hope. It's a process. It would be my spin. It's like everything from confrontation to learning something new. You have to go through that process of dealing with it. And the hardest part is managing your emotions and your thinking and those old scripts. And as you're
Wait, hold
running
on,
through all that.
Bonnie. What are the old scripts? Let's rewind.
Well, I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, which my grandfather was a Strom Thurmond supporter.
Okay.
And I've told this story several times. And he and my grandmother were very much segregationist. And I, would sneak out the front door and go around to the backyard and sit and eat with the yard man, or sit with the yard man while he was eating because we weren't allowed to eat together. His dishes had to be washed separate. It was really, old style thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they attempted to instill that in us. And I was, my grandfather was addressed, and I honestly felt like I was getting kicked out of vacation Bible school because of questions I was asking, like if God created everyone and Jesus loves everybody, why don't we love black people?
Mm.
What's the big deal here? So from a child's eyes, you think about things like that, right? And I even asked about a bumblebee that had its wing broken. If God doesn't want anybody to suffer, does that mean we should kill the bumblebee so it doesn't lay on the ground and suffer and die?
Mm-hmm.
These are, things that closed minded people can't give you an answer to. People who are set in a pathway of white supremacy, they can't think beyond their own, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, context, their own abilities to
Narcissism.
reason, right?
Yes.
So, when I hear people say things that come from that trigger those old scripts, meaning I've heard that before. There's a duality that takes place in me. One is my love for my grandparents will always be there,
Yeah.
but the resistance to that hate and that rhetoric is sometimes painful. And but I think that's where we have to be an accomplice and stand for what we believe in, and do the work with
Um,
with those people, whoever are triggering those scripts for us.
I appreciate you saying that, Bonnie. My question to all of you, and let's keep it real, there's no judgment in this interview tonight. None. It is this whole conversation with allies is a way to learn about each other, be open, and then learn how to move past it. And how are you all going to work it out personally, interpersonally, what have you. So one of the questions I wanted to ask after Bonnie shared so much of herself, I appreciate that. Is there a way that sometimes the bias seeps out? We're all human. And I'm a social worker, and Social Work 101 told me that we need to check our biases at the door. Well, it's not easy for people who have, they've lived one way all their lives, and then they're like in their 30s trying to become a social worker, and they really honestly thought that Black people were inferior. That's how they were raised, and that's how. But then, yet they need to go out into the community and assist people who are oppressed. A lot of times, it's Black folks, single mothers, and how do we prevent the conversation of making them feel like they're not making proper choices? If their choices don't match the choices of the therapist, which doesn't look like them, then how are you able to suppress those type of thoughts and processes? And it could happen in ways where you are collaborating with other organizations as a organizational member, and you're feeling like they're not doing something right, so we're just going to do it this specific way. How do you address those bias that kind of just seep out? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Can anyone
Anybody?
answer? Can I answer
Yes,
this one?
anybody. Feel
Okay.
free.
Um, I deal with this a lot actually. A lot of us do. A lot of white organizers do. Um, and I kind of like have to bring myself back, and you have to look into like, why are you here? What are you doing? Why are you in this space? You know, there's a lot of black spaces that white organizers are occupying that space, and the white organizer steps over and turns it into a toxic environment. And we don't always mean to do that, right? The intentions are always going to be, we want things to work out the way that we know how it
Mm-hmm.
works, right? And we think that we are doing the best job possible. And, you know, regardless of what we want to think, we were all raised, if we were white in America, we are all racist. Point blank, period. Um, that is it. The end. So if we need to like sit down, metabolize that for 24 hours, go ahead. But at the end of the day, we are raised that the devil is black and the angel is white. And if you really want to get back to it, that's really what we were taught, you know, in the old Tom and Jerry days. You know, we got to think about this. We got to think what we were really introduced, you know, into before we could even speak. So I bring it back to that. We always go into our bias. I'm always going to go into that. And over the past probably 5 years of my life, I've really changed the way I think about things now. I'm very intentional, but I'm also a little reckless. And I know that there are times where I overstep. There are times where I disrespect people, and I don't mean to. But the growth pattern is where you recognize it, you stop, you recognize it, you accept the fault, you accept the accountability. You say, hey, you know what? I was so wrong. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Or, you know, just being accountable is number one priority for me. And you know, I accept when other people can't accept accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely am not going to be quiet about it. So me personally, when it happens to me, which happens a lot, especially, I mean, shit, Lauren, you and I, when we're talking, it happens a lot. I have to check myself on a daily, you know, I'm like, well, I shouldn't have said that like that, or, you know, but I feel like we're each other's advocates, right? And we're gonna fuck up. Sorry, we're gonna, should I not say fuck up? I
No,
said
you
yeah.
can.
Okay, so we're going to say things that we shouldn't. And that's just the end. You know, we are all going to say wrong things. But that's in any relationship. And if we look at it like that and we realize that as a community organizer in a black space, we need to realize that, you know, our ultimate goal is to fill black spaces with black people and allow people to have their own spaces without us stealing culture from them, allowing people to have the space that they deserve. You know, even saying the word allowing, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's the part where we have to really reach and say, okay, here we are. You're the white person that's allowing space for others, you know? But that's
Mm.
just what I deal with on a daily, you know, and I have to watch myself, and I watch myself right now, shit, you know? So I think that if we're always in this, like, I'm learning phase of life, that we will consistently, you know, try to do the best and consistently fuck up, but at least we're accountable for it.
Hope and Bonnie, anything? Any thoughts you want to add to that, or I'm sorry, Hope. I think you're on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
That. For me, it's when I step in it, which is almost daily, it's around thinking that I somehow know what the solutions might be. You know, I think living in a world where the white lived experience, right, is what is centered. I think and I'm not going to speak for any other white person except myself, but, you know, I think I suffer often from sensing that, you know, I always have something to offer up, right, as part of either the story, the solution, the moment. And the fact is that is not necessarily true at all. And so where I get checked regularly and am trying to get better at checking myself is to recognize it's already in communities who are living, playing, working, being birthed, dying together. And that there is something important I can do in bearing witness, in listening, amplifying, right? In bringing other people sort of into some sort of experience or moment, but that it's not mine to solve. And so I think often my own desire to be helpful has at times been harmful. And those are tough and nasty lessons. But I also believe if we waited until we knew how to do all of this, we would be paralyzed in the work. And I see that happen with so many people who say, I'm afraid of messing up. I'm afraid of doing harm. I'm afraid of doing it wrong. I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so they choose to just do nothing. And I try to live by the advice I give to others, which is this is messy and it's awkward and it's going to take multiple lifetimes to fix it. And so just be ready to be messy and awkward. And to Chris's point, hold yourself accountable and be willing to listen when other people do the same, right?
Bonnie, anything?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I mean, it is, people are complex. Black people are complex, white people are complex. None of us are, cut out of a mold that are clones of each other. And so I try to get through the story quickly at Edwards Warder College doing voting. I had to go to the bathroom. They pointed me in the direction. I walked by a group of 3 or 4 black people in a circle, kids enjoying the day. I said, excuse me for interrupting, but could you tell me where the restroom is? And one young black lady looked at me with just intent rage in her eyes. I was not sure what was going to come up next. But that was quickly diffused by a very polite young man who stepped in and said, sure, we can help you. Just, So we have to recognize the intensity and the understanding of an ally from the black population varies. I mean, not everybody that you walk into is going to see you as an ally just because you say, hey, I'm white and I'm here to help. That's the worst thing you could possibly say, right?
Right.
But, really being able to be in a space and give them space for their feelings as well as you hold space of yours, so that when those, maybe they trigger something in you or something is triggered, that need to want to speak or take over or be in charge. Because, some of us get into activism because we want to fix things and control things and just make it all better right away. And we can't do that. It's all a process. So I think, if you're an activist and you're not willing to have self-reflection, you're in the wrong business. If you're an activist and you're not willing to open up your heart and your ears and your mind to the ideas of and the feelings and the plans of others, then and partner in those, you're in the wrong business, right? And I do see a lot of activists that get into this arena who are driven by ego, driven by self cause rather than a cause for the community, to support the community or the community need. Or they start out genuine and they seem to lose sight of the goal, the overarching goal, and focus more on what is relative to bringing them a sense of value. And I think that's why I think self-reflection is so important. I have met so many strong women of color, Latino, white, very capable, very, very capable women. And when I'm in a situation where I'm challenged or triggered, not always successful, but what I try to do is check myself, because it goes down to the value of, you know, what's at the heart of service,
Okay.
what's at the heart of community.
I love that, Bonnie. I think, that humility. I think so many people think of organizers and activists as always having to move out of a place of like determination or courage or bravado or whatever you want to call it, right? And there's a heavy dash of ego in some of that. And I actually think in our evolution in this work, humility and the willingness to be vulnerable is really, I feel, where our greatest power lies, because it's in that space of humility that we do our deepest learning, and where those tiny steps of the evolution
Hmm.
actually take place. It's not at the moment that you're standing at the tip of the sword. It's where you are licking the
Hmm.
wounds.
So
Yeah.
let's tap into that conversation. What is an ally? What is an ally? That wasn't on the test. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I
I
mean, you know,
You guys spoke of it. All of you have
well,
spoke
so
of it.
in a really simple form, and this is really for me very elementary, but reminding myself that it's about standing with, standing for, not speaking for, not doing for, not leading for, but it's being with, and to know what that even means often means sitting back in a really full, intentional, authentic sense, until someone may call you to stand with, right? I've often jumped in and thought, oh, I'm here and it matters that I'm here. We're like, I'm woke white woman, right? And so it matters that I'm present. And it's like, it only matters when I'm present if someone feels that there's something useful in me being present, right? Or that I can somehow use whatever it is I bring to the table, including the privilege of my white skin, um, to do something with that, right? And so for me, that being with, uh, and it's a lot harder than it seems. Like that's in a really elementary way of saying it, but that's hard, and goes back to that sort of ego piece that I think Bonnie so beautifully brought up.
Okay. Anybody else? What is an ally?
Um, I think that being an ally is just supporting each other, and I really think it has a lot to do with support. That would be like my key word. Um, I think we have a huge issue with entitlement just as a whole, not just in like our culture, but like in our like daily life right now.
Hmm.
I think when the government starves us of all essential things, we we have small bits of rage through pockets of the community. And when they start to accumulate the way they are now, it comes to like people hate each other over petty things. And so when we don't have support, we we don't have the tools to make certain decisions because of frustrations, because of depression, because of all of these things, right? We need support. And allyship is across the board probably the one thing that has kept people like me in the community, like keeping us moving. Um, because I rely on other allies. Like I rely on Hope, I rely on Bonnie, I rely on you, Lauren. I rely on my closest people that I deem smarter than me to help me to be better. And if you don't surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, then you're slowly dying. And if you're
Is
not
it really a
evolving,
conversation about intelligence, or is it just a conversation about
I
being
don't think
judged
I think
because
it's like
of
maybe
skin
intelligence
and
is
the
the
fact
wrong
that,
word. Yes. I
yeah,
think
because I
maybe
mean,
it's just like deem someone that's greater than me or more powerful than me or like has more um just something that I guess maybe that I want to emulate, I guess, is maybe that's the better term. But I want to surround myself with people that I just constantly learn from.
Okay.
And I feel like that's what allyship is for me, is like I can surround myself in spaces that I have the privilege to be in. I can collect information and acquire relationships, and in turn go to people that in the community that need these resources that obviously would not have had that link before. And I think that's where I become the support.
Okay.
So I've gotten in trouble before
Never.
by using a term that's called armchair activist.
Yeah.
Because I get a little frustrated because all people want to do is sit on social media and talk about things. That's not an ally to me, right? I mean, it's part of the work, confronting the misinformation, being a voice for the voiceless when you need to be, not instead of, but in support of. But I think being an ally means so much more than just saying, yes, I support Black lives. And it's really, you're either an armchair activist or you're in the game, right? So you're in the bleachers, you're on the bench, or you're in the game. And I get in trouble for that opinion at times, but I don't think anybody can do everything. But let's take the renaming of the schools. I couldn't go to every meeting, but I got calls, and I circulated the information, and I was calling people, and I was sending stuff out, and I went to the meetings that I could go to. So you got to conserve some of your energy there. And I stood up for it in public when people asked me questions. That's what you do. At the same time, I didn't go to the rally and grab a mic unless I was asked to speak. If I was asked to speak, I'm more than happy to lend my voice to the cause. But so I think an ally is somebody that's engaged, at least at a level that allows them to be connected and updated and informed, but yet preserves their ability to care for themselves and their family and their life. And who is willing to listen and to be supportive. They don't insert themselves in front of the pack, but they stand there side by side when asked to be. And they certainly don't allow misinformation and the injustices go unchecked. Right?
I love that, and the only other thing I would add that I'm not sure it's been said, and we may not all agree on this, but I also think being an ally, a co-conspirator, a comrade, whatever term we want to use, I think it requires risk. I think it requires people willing to take risk, be that risking safety with relationships, right? It requires it requires that vulnerability of sort of shedding what we know and shedding status quo. It can require us to risk or offer up into the world the concept of repair, meaning real reparations, being active in repair, right? We can't just point at a wound and it heal. Like, we have to be sort of active in that healing process. So I think the nature of being active in it, as you said, Bonnie, whether that's behind the scenes or in a more visible way, those all take risk, and they all take putting something in, right? It requires you to either give your energy, give your deepest love, that sort of radical love, love in action. And so, I would just say that because I think we underestimate though our risk is much less. It does require that. And I think for some people, if you don't recognize it requires it, what can happen is that when it starts to get hard or messy, people turn away.
Mm-hmm.
They
So I'm
walk away
gonna.
from the work because they
What
don't think it implies risk. And I actually think it does.
what you're speaking about is actually the precursor to my next question, and that has to do with where in the Black American struggle do you feel your role is best served?
Hmm.
Whether it could be, I'm going to give you some examples, and you don't need to choose those specifically. But we're talking about peacekeeping, organizing, fundraising, protesting, and it could be. And I hope you didn't really say this, but I sometimes feel like you do it in the realm of art,
Yeah.
and how our artwork is presented by a lot of our young artists in the community, and in other states. And I think that you bring it forth in the Yellow House in
Yeah.
such a respectful manner. And it's not just Black Americans, it's also many different people of color, specifically women of color. So I would say, that would be my opinion of you. And I'm just starting there.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Lauren. That means a lot coming from you. And I would say that that is, and in a broader sense, I consider that a position of being an amplifier, right?
Mhm.
The work is already being done, right? The stories are already out there. The lived experiences already exist. But if what I can do is provide some sort of vessel, platform, or amplification
Mhm.
for those stories, for that brilliance, right? That
Mhm.
to me is where I can sort of best be of service. And some
Mhm.
of that comes from coming through, a very traditional line of being an artist, an art historian, a
Mhm.
museum leader, all that mess. And for so much of that, the Black experience was not centered.
Mhm.
And then recognizing um, that there was deep systemic racism behind the fact that I went through all that training and a whole career and knew so little about the Black contribution to our collective culture. And
Mhm.
so what I do is very small in the big scheme of things. It's very small. Um, but it's out there. I mean, the amazing work is out there that really speaks truth.
Mhm.
And all I'm doing is providing a space for it, right?
Exactly.
And helping others sort of say what they need to say in the
Mhm.
very direct ways they need to say it, to provide a gracious and honest space for that work to happen. And so, yeah, I feel like my role is more as amplifier than maybe anything else.
Okay. Bonnie?
Well, that's a loaded question, I think, for me, or it's unanswered maybe completely, or it's not like
Okay.
I'm like in this category and this is what it
Oh,
is.
no, no, we're not meaning for. I'm that
Yeah,
question is
no, no. I mean, I think it's in the space of uplifting women's rights. I mean, there's so many inequities and injustices, whether we talk about the morbidity rate of expectant mothers
yeah.
in the Black community versus the white community,
Mhm.
access to health care. And then when they get that access to health care, that it's non biased, equal
Mhm. Right.
treatment, right?
Right.
Just incarceration rate. The pay gap for white women or black women, the incarceration rates of black women, the pay gap for black women versus white women and white men and women in general, and just the stigmas that are associated with mothers. When it comes to job opportunities and ability to manage leadership positions, there is a fight to be had, and I think trying to be a consistent voice on some of these issues is probably where I could best be serve the purpose.
Mhm.
It's my sister-in-law passed, and so that's fresh on my mind. But the pastor that did the service was a childhood friend of mine, he actually lived across the street from us when we were little, and we went to his father's church. But he made a statement in there, and it's so revealing to see how this man has changed through his life. But he made a statement in there that in the reality, very few people read the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and they learn what they learn about Christianity through the lives and the testaments of others. So I think it's pretty much the same way for allies. Other people will learn through our testament and through our lives of what we do and how we live and how we treat black people, Asian, Latino. So I think that it's not only in speaking out, but it's trying to model and check yourself about making sure you're modeling what should be modeled.
Yeah. Chris, anything? Or are you still, are you trying to be quiet?
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
He doesn't sleep very long. Um, I want to say like I guess I'm kind of like I want to be really real with you. The thing that really brought me to Jacksonville, like to work in the community, is the fact that oh I'm sorry, is the fact that I'm actually very physically loud. Like I have one of the loudest voices I have ever heard. I'm not even kidding. Like I went downtown one time when we could not have any amplification at all. Like we could not have anything. And I was so loud that it was like they couldn't shut me up. And I remember the cops every single time that I see the cops anywhere I go. They know who I am in this city. And at first I thought they didn't. You know, at first I was like, nah, there's a lot of them. They know who I am. And I realized it's because I'm loud as hell. So if I really could like think about the one thing that really like is fresh on my mind is like I really miss Ron Rawls. Like he was a huge impact on me. And when he left St. Augustine and he went to Gainesville, he's still around, but that was the one time that I realized this is something I can offer him that nobody else can. And he pretty much looked me in my eyeballs and was like, hey, every time that I go out there and I'm risking my life, I need you with me. And I was like, well, I don't know. And he was like, please. And I made sure that I was there every single time without fail. Sorry, my child's freaking out. But and that's my voice. Literally, I can be loud enough. You know, loud enough to where the cops can't speak over me. Loud enough to where the cops are not going to be able to speak over you, Lauren. You know, like I will call people out, you know, and I don't mind doing that. And I think that's really what I bring to the table is I really don't give a fuck if people like me. And he got that burp out. Did you hear it? But I don't care, you know, and it doesn't bother me that I hurt a couple of Karen's feelings, you know, like I don't care about that. I've been hurting people's feelings since I was a little girl. You know, I'm okay with doing that, and I think what I bring to the table is the fact that I just have this willingness to like be loud enough where they can't not hear us.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, that idea of protest, right? I think there is always this expectation of allies being engaged in protest. And I think that's important because to Bonnie's point, it makes visible, it makes it seen. I mean, we saw this even in the civil rights movement. It really took sometimes the presence of white bodies in the space for people to sort of begin to open their eyes to it. And, you know, I just want to say one thing about like age and generational shifts, which I think is so important. I think youth voices matter so much. And we saw that with the Change the Names work that happened here in Jacksonville. And myself being less of a protester and more of a peacekeeper and recognizing that maybe one of the best I can play when others are really grabbing that mic and people like Chris have the loud voice and young people are stamping their feet, one of the best things I can do is try to create a safe space for them, right? And so that's been an interesting evolution for me just literally in the last year and a half.
Being a peacekeeper.
Being a peacekeeper. And it's hard for me because I'm a big mouth, and I feel like I need to be in it. And so it's been part of my own evolution as a co-conspirator, is to recognize that creating a safe barrier around those who need to be heard is maybe the role. And that's a bit of that. That's just an example of that sort of knowing when to step back, right? Sort of reading where people need you and where there might be a need others won't fulfill, and getting out of the way so that others can sort of step fully into these other roles. So anyway, I just thought I would offer that up, because to my fellow peacekeepers, I think it's a role that matters, in letting others do and say what they need to do and say.
What is your check-in? How do you check in and know that you are moving in a proper direction as an ally, or in an improper direction as an ally? Where's your check-ins coming from?
Well, I can say for me, without naming names, that there's a gentleman who runs an organization that I have literally asked questions about: is this the role that I should take, or what do you think we ought to be doing? How should we fit into this? Or something occurred, and what do you think of this? Because I got to hear what to take away from other
Is he a
people.
white gentleman, or is
No,
he a...
no, he's black. He's
Okay,
black.
just curious.
And that wouldn't be a check-in to me if I'm an ally asking another white person how I check. How
That
I,
was your test.
that wouldn't be a
was your
check-in.
test in you.
So
Okay.
that's kind of what I do, and also because we do have a board, I'll check in occasionally with some of the members of the board. But there is also, and Lauren, we're talking openly. When you get into the details of some of these discussions with people that are different from you, whether they be Latino or Black or Asian or different cultures, there's always at times going to be a rub, and the person is going to see it their way, and you're going to see it your way. And then how do you make sure that love still abounds, that relationship continues to grow? And sometimes that's hard, especially if that person has been mean to you,
Mm-hmm.
or is not maybe in their right state of mind when they start to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall an incident where someone was heavily medicated and was being completely inappropriate with some of our board members, texting all hours of the night, calling all hours of the night because they wanted something done that the person couldn't do. Anyway, so we have to work through all those things, the rough parts, and get through it.
And I think I'm going to chime in just for 1 second about that, because to me, I think if there is some breakdown or some rubbing, going on, I think just on the next time, the fact that we're all still standing together, to me, the person, either person would still come back. They're still coming back to stand up for the next issue or what have you. They trust and feel that maybe you or others are sincere, and that we're just trying to find a way to get it right. We're all human.
Yeah.
And, the humility comes in just being able to stand next to each other on the next go round. So I don't know if that would be enough for you, Bonnie, but to me, I could see that happening. This is a frustrating time. Yeah. We have gone from, and I know people growl, but we went from Obama, where we were able to relax and start liking people again. And then we had another president who brought back those biases and brought back some of those ways in which you were raised and reminded. And it's not specifically about you three ladies, but I'm talking about people who are not allies and not
Mhm.
sure where to put their, their trust. They were fine growing up with black people on the basketball teams and, football teams, and they played alongside. But then when somebody came out and opened up Pandora's box, they remembered, yes, we have a legacy here. And
Yeah.
we are, you know what I'm saying? So it's just been a trying time for everybody. And I'm curious, how is it, as an ally to be able to um, stand tall? And also, like, how do you know you are being validated? And that's what I mean about the check-in. Like, who is validating you? Who is saying you're doing a good job? Da, 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 whatever. So we can keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I mean, I really appreciate so much of what you just said. It really resonated for sure. Especially that part about like, even when relationships, there's tension, right?
Hmm.
That if we're all actually most interested in the cause at hand,
Hmm.
recognizing we all, as long as we're going in the same direction, we all
Hmm.
take a slightly different path.
Right.
And if we can still stand beside each other, even with
Hmm.
that tension, that's really powerful, because you know what? The systems in the world around us want to put wedges between us.
Hmm.
Like, one of the goals is to separate us, because if poor people, black people, allies, immigrants, refugees, if we all actually bind together,
Hmm.
shit, I mean, the world is a different place, right?
Right.
And power doesn't want that to happen.
Mm-mm.
So, I think, Bonnie's story about check-in is very similar to me. I have several close relationships of people who I regularly have conversations with and check in with. I had a time in my recent life and career. I didn't have as much of those folks that I was checking in with. They were there, but I was too nervous and concerned about burdening them, right?
Mm.
With
Okay.
this idea of of me needing to get advice from them, right? And just being very conscious of that. Um, but that's critical to find those people that you have like real, authentic, meaningful relationships with, who you can also sit in that uncomfortable space of hearing that truth.
Hmm.
Uh, and there's also this recognition that we are constantly moving along a spectrum. You talked about this time in which we're in, and nothing we know, none of it's new. But we do have these moments where we feel like we're able to sort of relax into something that feels a little more like the world we want to live in. And
Hmm.
then we get hit upside the head really hard with the fact that we're not even close, right? And that the work continues. And, I'm just very grateful for those folks in my life. Some of them who live here and have been working in time, others who had to leave this city because the city just wasn't, did not really feel safe
Hmm.
for them anymore in the work they were trying to do. And I'm grateful to be learning from them on the regular. And one of my close friends, Rodney Hurst, always says, you can get tired, but you can't get weary,
Right.
right? Like, you
Right.
got to stay in the game, and you really don't have an option. If you're saying you care about this, you have no option to leave. You just have to find those ways to keep working through it, step back when you need to step back, but you can't step out.
So you're dedicated. Chris, anything?
That's I've just kind of been like sitting back and listening because I, you know, as much as y'all don't want to hear this, like, you guys are my mentors. Like, I listen.
Chris?
Um, is it not working? Can you not
No,
hear
I
me?
just, yeah, there you go. Keep it
Is this
closer.
okay? I'm so sorry.
Perfect.
I'm gonna get this fixed. But I look at you guys as my mentors. I really do. Um, I actually was just talking to Miss Pat like the day before yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, I really like look up to her a lot because she like is like adamantly like intent on telling me how she feels about things. And like I love that. I need that.
True.
A lot of people do not tell me about myself. And I feel like that can be something of a burden to me because I want to know, but people feel, oh, well, you're a very strong person, so I'm going to try not to offend you. But in reality, I'm not going to get butthurt if someone comes to me and says, hey, how you said that, I'm not a huge fan of how you said that, or even being blatant, like, hey, well, you're being racist. And my first response is always going to be, you're probably right. I said something that was racist because I'm working my entire life to unlearn all the racist things that have been jam packed into my brain. Um, so I guess my biggest thing that I'm taking from all of this, what you guys are saying about having your check in partner and having the people that you're accountable with, is like the people that you trust the most, you know, are honestly sometimes not going to be super honest with you
True.
about like what you're doing. And all too often, there's people in the movement that have broken us down. And there have been, I mean, in the last 6 years of my life, countless times where I've sat down and had a lot of self pity and cried about treatment that was thrown at me. Um, but if I just sat back and said, you know what, I'm done, you know, then all I'm doing is hurting the movement even further. If you really think about it, we have to be mission focused. And if our mission is to liberate black and brown voices and people, then we need to get the fuck out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Well
have a lot
said.
of accountability partners, guys.
So before we end this wonderful podcast, I number one want to mention number one, just thank you all for being here. And number two, I wanted to mention the Black Commission's We Are One Summit that we have coming up September 25th. It's an all-day event, and everyone is invited. We'll be putting up the Eventbrite by the end of the week. And well, actually, I'm sorry, we are limiting it to 60 people, but everybody in those 6 people are able to come. um, Breakfast and lunch will be served. There will be some keynote speakers, and there will be some breakout sessions in which hopefully you ladies will be participating in running these breakout sessions. One of the breakout sessions, and they are all meant to teach. The whole day is meant to be educational. It starts at 8:30, it ends at 4, and we are still formulating the whole plan. So in the next couple of weeks, we will be talking more about what the summit will entail. But just save the date for September 25th. And I have one more question before we close out. For all of you, what has changed and what needs to change since you are identified as an ally? So, what has changed, and what do you think personally still needs to change? These are personal questions. Anybody can start.
Are you asking what has changed in the movement
No,
or within us personally?
within you, within you.
Mm.
This is the secret of the sleepover. It looks like we're in a sleepover, doesn't it?
It does.
But yeah, this is the secret that you have to tell each other.
Wow.
I'm gonna tell you mine because I'm not an ally, but I can tell you from the outside looking in. What's changed is I have learned to know what your roles are and that your roles are sincere. In beginning, I think when I started with activism, I wasn't really sure how white folks played a role in the issues that we were all dealing with. It seemed like, for me, white folks were part of the problem. And I understand our civil rights history and so on and so forth, but it was still few and far between. I grew up the only black one in my school for 8 years. And then I went to a high school that was mixed race. But I thought the friends that I had grown up with were just, honest and loved black folks, and then find out that they started to use words that I didn't want to hear. And there were different things. And it was all, now that I look back, it was probably their parents that instilled, like Bonnie was saying, like instilled this type of thought process. They liked me, they didn't have a problem with me until their parents told them that no, I couldn't come over to the sleepover, or no, you're not going to go over to her house, blah blah blah. So I we've had a pretty good life. I'm 52 years old, 50 going on 52, and I enjoy people. I travel. I love learning about other cultures and so on and so forth. But when you move down to a southern city that has been number one, just the good old boys type of historical relationship and influence, they're married to white women, and they're married to women who argued against folks who were trying to take down the statues and take down the flags and so on and so forth, and didn't see anything wrong with it. And I had, homeschooling moms that I was friends with that would tell me once we moved down that they were raised in a very racist family. So then you're like, wow, okay. How do I deal with that? Are they honest? Do they like me because of me, or because I'm a novelty in a setting of white faces? So when I come to do advocacy work, I mean, like I said, I'm a social worker. I was one of four black caseworkers in my job up in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to training with a white girl who's younger than me, just graduated, has no children, telling one of my sisters as we walk into her home that she's wrong, and everything that she's done as a mother that I attest to, because you got to do what you got to do sometimes, that she's wrong. And that the things that she's done in regards to obtaining food or staying with this man that's abusing her because she needs money or whatever, she's staying in this sub sub type of living space because she can't afford anything else. And her Kmart job, back in the day, there was a Kmart job that she was working in that wasn't affording her enough to afford something that my cohort, who parents live in a better space, gave her money for college, so on and so forth. She even went to college. She's making judgments against my sister here, who I'm out there too to make sure she's okay, but my approach is different. So it was, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, working along people who don't look like me, who are judging people who do. To be in a healing, empowering role. And it wasn't working out like that. So like I said, I retired, came down here, and I see a police officer shooting a young black man down the street from where I live in Springfield. And that's where I started. And the officer was white. And the young man, number one, had the same name as my oldest son. And then also the young man was killed. So, and he looked like me, and he looked like my children. So it was hard for me to understand why, like, do these people who are white really, is there sincerity there? Do they really trust who we are? Do they understand that I don't know, I don't need to be told what to do. I need advocacy alongside me because we don't have equity. And I don't know, I know that's a whole nother discussion. So for me, getting to know the three of you, I would say the change has been that I've learned that your sincerity is truth. and that you try hard to check yourselves all the time, but also advocate for people like me and who look like me. Does that make sense? Can you hear everything I'm saying?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I'm getting faces like, ooh. Um, but
No.
you all can feel free to answer that same question. What do you think personally has changed within you? And are there still changes that are needed? I'm not ignoring you. I'm finding my charger. I'm back.
Oh.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I think I could honestly say I've learned so much about the Jacksonville community and the political realm, but also I've learned some more and probably need to learn more about the Black community and the different levels and layers within the community. So, like, I understand there's a religious space where there are pastors who are community leaders, right? There's the activist space, there's the political space, there's even it's like a subspace where there are other um, activist organizers, charitable in nature, that have followings. And, one of the biggest challenges that I've learned in the Black community is getting those groups to pull together. Either egos prevail or missions go off on a tangent, or they don't agree with each other's style or way of achieving an outcome. But the gaps exist. But personally, I've learned that I'm learning to pick and choose my battles. Because if not, you want your flame to burn bright. You don't want it to burn out. And it's a matter of what would make the most impact. Where can you be the most helpful or supportive, and where you need it the most? Figuring all that out is a huge challenge. And for me. And I've also learned very clearly you're just not going to change some people's ideas and thinking. There are some people that you just don't waste your time on, right? Because they're going to think what they think, they're going to do what they want to do, and then you got to figure out how to work around them to achieve some positive outcomes, right? And that's what it's been a huge learning for me this year. And then also, I think learning to say when enough is enough for me, of what I can do and what I can't do. That's been one of the learnings.
Anybody else?
I'm sort of in alignment with Bonnie on that. The whole issue of, you know, um, well, almost everything that Bonnie said. Actually, I think, I feel that as far as a learning piece for sure. Feeling like a community, and then it doesn't take long to recognize that you don't. And what does it then mean to immerse yourself more fully in a place, because that place is really the people. And so that's been a big part of it, especially being somebody who is native to this community. I mean, even in the arts, when I left the museum that I was at for 20 something years, I thought I knew my shit when it came to arts and culture in Jacksonville. And I very quickly realized that as I grounded myself again in who I am, I realized how little I knew, and it was a huge hit to the ego, and maybe one of the best falls one could take, really. It was important and powerful. So, but for me, like Bonnie, it's like I always have thought it was just a matter of people knowing and getting more educated about things and getting information and having a relationship with someone. As long as you could sort of put those elements together, that of course we could change hearts and minds. Every heart and mind could be changed. And I don't feel that way anymore. I actually think it's more we just need enough people. We don't need everybody, and we're not going to get everybody. And that's actually a hard learning. I mean, it's, as somebody who tries to, though I'm a skeptic, I try to be optimistic, and that's been a hard learning, but it's getting easier during this time of pandemic. I feel like our sense of the fact that not everybody is really with those that are their neighbors. I think we're seeing that play out in a wide variety of ways right now. For
Hope,
sure.
I have a question. I have a quick question. So you said that you are not sure if you're changing hearts and minds. Is that of others?
Well, I mean, I think the idea of changing hearts and minds, like trying to build a larger base of supporters, right? To build a larger base of people who really want change, even if they're not necessarily going to be deeply engaged in that change. I feel like I have always felt like anyone could be inspired to be part of progress. But I actually don't believe that. I no longer believe that.
Would you stop doing the work because of that?
No, I have not stopped doing the work. If anything, it's made me more determined, and it makes me less frustrated when I don't feel the progress, because we don't need everyone. We don't need everyone. And there's something liberating about that. There's something freeing about recognizing, was it Margaret Mead that said, all major things can, they start to happen because of a very small group of people. Everything always has. It's always taken just a small group of people. And I actually think we have much more than a small group of people. And this concept of allyship, I think, is a part of that. But I do find it frustrating when you feel like you don't have the wherewithal to move some of those hearts and minds, right?
Whose hearts and minds are we speaking of?
I'm talking about other white people. I'm talking about people who are apathetic and are willing to just watch the demise of their neighbors, especially Black and brown neighbors.
Okay.
It's just sort of recognizing that there's this, that it's more than the interpersonal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I've always thought, as long, if there was hand-to-hand combat it's between groups of people, that we could get there. But there's this systemic piece that keeps some people convinced. It also keeps some people down. It also keeps us from one another. Mm-hmm. And so I've tried to shift from such a focus on just the interpersonal to how do we change the balance of power, right? What does it mean to vote? Who is in office? Who has power within communities? Where are the resources? What does reparations look like, right? Mm-hmm. What does equity really mean when we're talking about education, healthcare, human rights, economics? Because, it's not just about the four of us sharing a space together. It's about how do we harness the power of groups like this to change that other stuff? Right. Okay. And I don't need everybody to be in that.
Right.
We're not going to get everybody in that.
Okay. You're talking about other allies. That's why I wasn't sure. Because that's why I was like, well, would you just stop doing the work if you weren't getting the responses from the Black community? But you were speaking of your allies, not specifically. And Bonnie, is that the same?
I mean, sometimes we all wish we could in some ways feel like we have days where like the work needs to stop. But, once you see, you can't unsee, right? And once you're in, I'm not sure you can get out.
Nope, you can't. Trust me, I'm a social worker. Can't. Is it? What are you laughing for, Chris? Are you laughing about
I'm not. I'm
me?
not. I'm not laughing. I'm just like I'm. I'm taking it all in. I. There's been so much change in me in the last 5 years.
Hmm.
Even if you don't know me that well, there's been a drastic change in my life in the past 5 years. Physically, I mean, now I have another human, but like emotionally, and as much as I want to think I'm not as sensitive as I used to be, I am 100% more sensitive now in different ways. And I feel like I have awakened certain parts of me
Hmm.
that I was afraid of. And I was told my whole life, you are too strong, you are too aggressive, you know, you're too much like a man. I heard, you'll never get married because you fish too much and you're too independent. I mean, these are real things, and so these are real things, and I'm not lying, and these are things that I've heard my whole life. It's essentially the same as like if I were to say to a black or brown person their whole life, you're not as good as me. You're not as good as me. You're not as good as me. And I'm not trying to compare those two, but I'm just saying that I can at least acknowledge that if I'm feeling like the least bit upset about someone coming at me about my motherhood, my womanness, or my lack thereof, and the opinion of what they think I'm supposed to be, but I don't want to be that cookie cutter person, nor would I ever think I would fit that cookie cutter. But if I'm feeling that, just imagine if I were black. And that's all I think in my head. Like, if I'm having a really bad day and I feel overly rejected by the whole world, I know that I'm still okay right now. And I know that the village around me will eventually hear my cry, right? Like it's a real thing. And that's where I've learned. And that's what I've learned about my village is that, we are the ultimate family. And, we are the family that we choose to be. And I don't care whose ego it is. I don't care whose wiener's bigger than the others. I don't care. What I really care about is like, how are we treating each other daily? Because how you treat me and how I treat you, that could be the last interaction that we have together. And do we want to leave that imprint on each other? What do you want to leave each other with? And that's the growth I've had because 5 years ago, I could give a shit how I
Hmm.
leave anyone. Now I care about it. Now I want to change it.
Anybody want to add anything before we end the podcast? Okay. Well, I would like to thank Hope, Bonnie, and Chris for participating in this wonderful, deep um, conversation. I know it made everybody a little nervous, but I think everybody did a good job in explaining your own self and your own microcosm of community work that you've been doing. And I hope to hear more from you all as we do the summit. I did ask for you all to participate and teach a class for allies in a setting that was a safe space for allies to come together and just talk about how to be not a good ally, I don't want to say it like that, but how to be sincere and legitimate and intentional. And that's not anything that any of us could tell you. It has to come from you all. And and you have a connectedness as you move forward in being an ally that I'll never understand. However, I appreciate you all letting the audience into your world for a couple hours, for about an hour, let's say an hour. And I'm going to end by saying thank you all for watching and sharing space with us.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
hosting this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
This
You're
was
most
awesome. Thank
welcome.
you.